This is the bloodiest and most brutal purge campaign on the European hot goods front. A transnational arms trafficking case has led to 3 particularly serious murder cases. Intense gunfire shook the world, erupting on the streets of Paris. Countless crimes were gradually exposed. The confrontation between the police and criminals has never stopped, and how will this life-and-death battle end? 2 days ago, Reynal was an undercover cop fighting against hot goods trafficking. In order to gain the trust of the hot goods kingpin Castroviejo, he didn't hesitate to pick a fight with the Spanish police, and was eventually forced to pose as a criminal in prison. The day he was released, Gracia, the second in command of the syndicate, personally came to pick him up. Gracia not only hosted a welcome party for Reynal, but also brought a whole van full of young girls as a reward. Reynal, unfazed, happily accepted. He then followed Gracia to the syndicate's headquarters. It was clear that the opposing side had already considered Reynal one of their own. Not only did they introduce him to the key members of the gang, but they also directly led him to meet the kingpin Castroviejo. Castroviejo warmly welcomed Reynal, stating that he had put in quite a lot of effort to get him out. Then, Castroviejo changed his tone. Reynal, take a good rest. In 2 days, there will be a big deal involving 300 kilograms of hot goods, and I'll need you to go along. Reynal immediately nodded in agreement, calculating in his mind how to send a signal outside. After returning to his room, he borrowed the phone of his roommate, Sat. It turned out that there was a strange rule here. Anyone entering the estate had to hand over their communication devices to Sat for safekeeping, and would only get them back when leaving. Although Sat didn't seem particularly intelligent, he was extremely loyal to Castroviejo. Despite Reynal's persistent persuasion, Sat still refused to agree. Helpless, Reynal pretended to be angry and returned to his room. Sat had no idea that Reynal had made preparations in advance. After confirming that no one was watching, Reynal immediately reached under the sink to search. It turned out that he had previously hidden a SIM card and a GPS device there. 2 days later, a yacht carrying 300 kilograms of hot goods landed on the coast of Sevilla in Spain. Then, 4 armed hot goods traffickers jumped off the boat, carefully scanning the surroundings. At this point, Reynal and his group had already been waiting for a long time. After confirming that all the tourists on the beach had left, they quickly transferred all the goods onto the truck. Throughout the unloading process, everyone was on edge, keeping a close watch on their surroundings. Only when the last package was loaded onto the truck did they finally breathe a sigh of relief. They didn't dare delay any longer, starting the car and immediately leaving the coast to return to Castroviejo's estate. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a particularly serious murder case had occurred in Paris, France. Sarah, the head of the hot goods anti-trafficking team in the region, upon understanding the situation, discovered that this case was closely linked to a hot goods smuggling case involving a car transporting a large quantity of goods from Spain to France, which she was handling. After a meeting, the police decided to merge the investigations of the 2 cases. Sarah and local criminal police captain Charles became the new partners. However, the progress of the case was not smooth. 2 days later, Sarah's informant was assassinated. Her superior, Carter, felt something was off, because just the night before, Sarah had been chasing the car transporting the hot goods with the informant. Yet today, that person had died mysteriously. Sarah explained that it was just a coincidence, but Carter didn't believe her, and even threatened to report her to the committee. At that moment, Sarah was distracted by the case, and didn't have the mind to deal with Carter. She only said she would submit the report soon and turned to leave. In the evening, her partner Bob couldn't help but ask her, was there any news from Reynal? It had been 3 months, and the other side had not sent any information. Was she still sure that he was one of their own? Sarah didn't respond, but her attitude clearly showed she still trusted Reynal. At that time, Reynal was still carefully working undercover. Soon after, he received his latest mission, to follow Gracia in transporting the hot goods brought from the sea and distribute them to Paris, France, and Toulouse. Once he received the exact information, Reynal immediately took the excuse of needing rest to return to his room. He reached into the sink to retrieve the SIM card he had hidden earlier. Then, when Sat was out of the room, he stole the man's phone. He quickly typed and sent the intelligence report. However, just as he was removing the SIM card and preparing to leave, he found Sat standing in front of the door. Reynal quickly exited through another door, and luckily, he was not caught. Meanwhile, in Paris, Charles was leading his team to continue the investigation into the double murder case. Lucy, a member of the team, had extracted the surveillance footage from the crime scene. The result was that, aside from a suspicious black sedan and 2 unidentified individuals whose faces couldn't be seen, they didn't find anything else unusual. Even the car's license plate was fake. What made the team even more suspicious was that since the crime had occurred, the mother of the 2 victims had not appeared. The investigation had come to a standstill, and Charles could only ask the team members to continue tracking the suspicious individuals and issue a nationwide manhunt to search for the missing mother. At the same time, in Toulouse, France, after receiving the information sent by Reynal, Sarah and her partner Bob immediately went to Paris that night. to seek assistance from the director of the Criminal Investigation Bureau, Molin. They exchanged a few words before getting straight to the point. Molin didn't beat around the bush and plainly stated that they currently lacked the manpower and could not temporarily assign anyone to assist with the case. He suggested that Sarah contact the Spanish police directly, since the hot goods shipment originated from there. However, Sarah seemed uncomfortable with the idea, as Castroviejo had long bribed the local police. Now, with officials and criminals colluding, any action taken would alert the enemy and lead them to be cautious. Moreover, compared to the criminal responsible for the transport, the anti-hot goods team was more eager to catch the person who received the shipment, Nebu. While Sarah was busy running around dealing with the car transport case, the Paris police discovered another body by the Seine River. After an autopsy, they speculated that the perpetrator of this crime was the same person responsible for the earlier double murder, and was most likely someone familiar with the victims, as there were no signs of a struggle on the body. Charles listened thoughtfully. At this moment, Lucy also brought in the latest investigation result. The black car and the person who disposed of the body, captured by the surveillance cameras last night, completely matched the murder case at the hospital. However, the cameras still couldn't capture the face of the suspect. Fortunately, Lucy had used special software to track a phone number that appeared at both crime scenes. After tracing the signal, they discovered that there had been a call from Spain in the past 2 days. Upon hearing this, Charles immediately thought of the hot goods transportation case Sarah had mentioned. It seemed that the two cases were indeed connected. Meanwhile, while everyone was resting before departure, Reynal quietly approached the hot goods transport vehicle and quickly attached a tracking device to the underside of the car. From far away in France, Sarah immediately received the tracking signal and prepared an ambush at the highway exit. Soon after, the convoy carrying the hot goods officially set off. To avoid suspicion, they intentionally arranged for a woman to sit in each vehicle to disguise them as regular passenger vehicles. Additionally, every trafficker involved in the transport carried a weapon. Reynal, riding a motorcycle, was leading the way. Under his guidance, the 3 trucks carrying hot goods sped toward Paris, France. Initially, they planned to drive straight through without stopping, heading directly to the transaction point. However, the plan quickly went awry. The woman traveling with Sot suddenly started vomiting, and the smell of vomit spread throughout the vehicle. This immediately infuriated Sot. Just as he was about to explode, he realized the woman had gone into shock. Reluctantly, Sot broke the rules, driving off the highway and stopping at the roadside. He immediately got out of the car to check the woman's condition, constantly complaining about her. At that moment, a police patrol car slowly approached. 3 officers got out and asked about the situation. Sot hurriedly explained that his wife was suffering from motion sickness and would be fine after resting for a while. However, his tense demeanor immediately made the officers suspicious. The 3 officers placed their hands on their holsters and cautiously asked Sot to cooperate with the investigation. Realizing that he could no longer deceive them, Sot had no choice but to proceed without turning back. He made an excuse to reached into the car, pulled out a gun, then fired it, killing the nearest female officer. The sudden gunshot caused chaos among the police. The 2 remaining officers immediately returned fire. Sot was shot multiple times, forced to take cover behind the car, and was too scared to show his face. Fortunately, in that critical moment, Gracia appeared just in time, armed with a rifle, and finished off the last officer. He didn't forget to step out of the car and fire another shot. However, Sot didn't dare to feel relieved because Gracia's gaze was terrifying, as if he wanted to swallow him whole. He quickly rushed to the passenger seat to check on the woman, and found that she had been hit by a stray bullet during the shootout, and had stopped breathing. Ignoring the pain in Sot's eyes, Gracia signaled for him to throw the woman's body into the grass by the roadside. Then, with a murderous look, he questioned Sot about why he had violated the rule of stopping in the middle of the road. Sot tried to explain, but Gracia immediately struck him. If it weren't for the need to complete the transaction, Gracia would have dealt with this troublemaker on the spot. Given that the police could discover the dead officer's body at any time, Gracia immediately canceled the original route and decided to take a smaller, more secluded road to avoid being chased by the police. At the same time, Sarah, waiting at the highway exit, noticed that the hot goods convoy had deviated from the planned route via the tracking system. She quickly got out of the car to inform her partner, Bob. Just as she finished speaking, another colleague brought the latest information. They had received an official report from Spain that 3 patrol officers had been killed on the highway, and the shooter was likely part of the hot goods trafficking group. Upon hearing this, the anti-hot goods team immediately decided to head to the crime scene to investigate. However, at the scene, aside from the bloodstains, the bodies, and the remaining shell casings, they didn't find any additional valuable clues. As for the woman's body discarded in the grass, DNA testing would be needed to identify her. Realizing Realizing that the case could not be solved quickly, Sarah calmed herself and prepared to wait until the hot goods convoy reached the transaction location before deploying forces for a full-scale ambush. Meanwhile, Charles had also obtained information about the shootout on the highway. What shocked him even more was that the DNA of the woman found at the Paris hospital crime scene matched the body of the woman discarded in the grass. Therefore, when he learned that Sarah was preparing to lead the anti-hot goods team in a raid at the transaction location, Charles also decided to join her to link all the cases together thoroughly. No one knew that, at that moment, Gracia had led the convoy to a rural house. He used the excuse of bad weather to ask for shelter for one night. The homeowner initially didn't want to agree because the group of strangers didn't seem like good people. But seeing the menacing look in Gracia's eyes, he reluctantly gave in and allowed them in, even providing a hearty meal for them. At first, Gracia truly just wanted to borrow a place for one night, but unexpectedly, in the evening, when the homeowner went to check the sheep pen as usual, he accidentally spotted a car full of bullet holes. He immediately turned pale, realizing that these were dangerous individuals. This scene was also witnessed by a man who was stepping outside to make a phone call. To prevent the homeowner from reporting them to the police and exposing their whereabouts, he did not hesitate to pull the trigger and kill him. The sound of heavy rain masked the gunshot. The people inside the house didn't realize anything was wrong. It wasn't until Gracia entered, drenched, that Reynal noticed something was off. The homeowner's wife also sensed the dangerous atmosphere and kept begging Gracia to spare her. But of course, these hot goods traffickers had no compassion. Gracia led Reynal, along with the homeowner's wife and son, to the basement, instructing him to take care of things thoroughly, leaving no loose ends. At the same time, Charles, Sarah, and Molin had gathered. Together, they discovered that the convoy of hot goods was stopping at a farm. However, to avoid alerting the enemy, Molin only sent a surveillance team to monitor the area. Since the route to the transaction point had to pass through the border, the investigation bureau would later send an undercover agent. When the convoy reached its destination, everyone would immediately execute the arrest. Charles felt that the plan wasn't entirely sound, so he asked if there were any other options aside from Reynal being the informant. Molin and Sarah shook their heads, saying that Castroviejo was very cautious and paranoid. Gaining his trust and sending information had been extremely difficult. Unexpectedly, Charles proposed a second plan. Before coming to Paris, he had thoroughly investigated and discovered that the mastermind behind the series of murders in Paris was Jelen, a notorious mob boss in the area. Since this case was closely related, it was highly likely that he was one of the recipients of the hot goods. Charles's speculation was not unfounded, as a witness had accidentally recorded the entire process of Jelen carrying out his plan. They had left an hour earlier, on two BMW X6 vehicles with fake license plates, leaving Paris. Their main objective was the transaction point, according to Reynal's information. The route they had to take included a toll station. Charles believed that they could coordinate their actions there, arrest Jelen first, and eliminate part of the threat. Sarah and Molin nodded in agreement, thinking that this plan was completely feasible. The next morning, Gracia led the convoy, preparing to continue their journey. To avoid attracting the attention of the police, Saad had left the bullet-riddled car behind and transferred all the hot goods to the homeowner's SUV. The group immediately set off. This time, the convoy successfully crossed the French border, speeding towards the transaction point. As they passed a gas station, Reynal hid the SIM card he had prepared in his mouth, then separated from the convoy to enter the restroom. After finding a discreet spot, he called Sarah to inform her that the transaction would take place at 8 a.m. today at Casener Castle. Upon receiving the latest information, Sarah immediately gathered the team and set off in haste to prepare an ambush at the destination. On the way, a series of incidents caused Gracia's temper to grow increasingly irritable. As soon as Reynal returned to the group, he was harshly scolded by Gracia. Reynal didn't mind and responded with a friendly gesture, then said nothing more, jumping on his motorcycle to continue clearing the path ahead. Soon after, the hot goods convoy finally arrived at the transaction location. Sarah, who was lying in wait outside the castle, received immediate notification. However, just as they were preparing to act, Bob noticed something unusual. Why would these hot goods traffickers dare to conduct the deal so openly in the city center? Just as he finished speaking, a school bus appeared from a distance, solving his confusion. It turned out that the criminals were planning to use the students as a cover, ensuring that even if the police suddenly showed up, they wouldn't dare to fire recklessly in the area. Sure enough, despite Sarah and her team's growing anger, they couldn't take the risk of launching an attack when they saw the students getting off the bus. They were forced to watch as Gracia and Nebu completed the deal right under the police's nose. However, Sarah had a countermeasure in place. Seeing that Gracia's car was about to leave, she immediately signaled to the police ahead via the radio to let Reynal and Saat's vehicles pass first. She then arranged for a truck to block the side road, cutting off the convoy and stopping all of Gracia and his associates' vehicles. In the next moment, a large group of anti-hot goods, police armed with weapons stormed in and arrested both parties involved in the deal on the spot. Meanwhile, Charles had also led a team to intercept the vehicle sent by Jelen to complete the transaction. As for Raynal and Sot, who had been specially released, they had arrived at a river bend on the outskirts. This was the pre-arranged location for the deal with Jelen. After stopping the car, Sot immediately contacted Gracia to check the situation, but no one answered the phone. He quickly realized something was wrong. At the same time, Jelen's men arrived and brought news that Gracia had been arrested. Upon hearing this, Sot urgently called Jelen to inform him that the police had raided the transaction location. Jelen was furious. After getting the details, he ordered Sot to transfer the remaining 150 kilograms of hot goods to the fake license plate BMW he had prepared. Then, Jelen coldly reminded Sot that their convoy definitely had an informant, and the most suspicious individuals were Raynal and Moss, who had escaped with Sot. After hanging up, Sot immediately pulled out his gun and questioned the two of them about who the real undercover cop was. Raynal remained calm, and instead, he walked straight towards Sot's gun, signaling that if Sot truly thought he was the mole, he should shoot. After a moment of silence, Sot finally changed direction and shot Moss dead. He still chose to trust Raynal, as they had been together the longest. However, little did he know, the person he trusted the most was actually the real undercover cop. At the same time, Carter, the director of the Anti-Hot Goods Bureau in Toulouse, had also arrived in Paris. He expressed his gratitude to Molin and Charles for their cooperation, and then informed everyone that tomorrow there would be another operation, an assault on Castroviejo's base, to capture the entire ruthless hot goods trafficking group. And they couldn't overlook Jelen either. However, since the local police had been bribed, Sarah asked Charles if he could continue to assist in monitoring Jelen's Isnara movements. Charles, of course, did not refuse. After everything was arranged, Carter prepared to escort Gracia and his accomplices back to Toulouse for trial. But before that, to gather more useful information about Castroviejo, Sarah personally interrogated Gracia. Unexpectedly, not only did he refuse to provide any information, but he also insulted Sarah with vulgar language. A police officer standing nearby overheard and immediately became furious. Without saying a word, he slapped Gracia hard across the face. Although no useful information was extracted from Gracia, Charles learned from other traffickers that the double murder at the Paris hospital had been orchestrated by Castroviejo's hot goods syndicate. Therefore, the next day, a fully armed special forces team launched a raid on Castroviejo's base. Faced with the door being broken down, Castroviejo remained calm as usual. He had hidden a sharp dagger in his sleeve, then pretended to surrender. As the police approached, he suddenly launched an attack. Two officers didn't have time to react and fell right on the spot. Soon after, all the criminals in the base were subdued, but Castroviejo was nowhere to be found. Lucy, the leader of the team, found this very strange and ordered a thorough search. What they didn't know was that Castroviejo had already changed into a special forces uniform and boldly walked out of the base. However, before he could step past the main gate, a quick-thinking officer recognized him. Lucy and her team immediately raised their guns and approached. Seeing that he was blocked from both sides, Castroviejo decisively removed his disguise. No longer disguised, this ruthless hot goods kingpin finally met his punishment. Meanwhile, the convoy escorting Gracia and his men to Toulouse encountered an issue. A car accident ahead on the highway forced them to stop. Sarah felt a sense of unease rising within her, sensing that something was about to happen. Everyone immediately focused and kept a sharp eye on Gracia and Nebu. But an unexpected turn of events occurred. Gracia turned to the female hot goods trafficker beside him. She immediately understood the signal and said she needed to use the restroom. While the police obviously wouldn't give her any chance to escape, the next moment, a violent scuffle erupted. Both sides suffered heavy casualties. Members of the Special Forces team fell one after another, and only Gracia was left standing on the criminals' side. Taking advantage of Sarah ducking to avoid bullets, Gracia quickly ran onto the highway, crossed a muddy path, and disappeared into the woods by the roadside. He then found a safe house where he could eat and watch the news. This particularly serious international hot goods trafficking case had attracted a great deal of attention. Every day, reporters surrounded the Toulouse police headquarters, continuously updating the progress of the case 24/7. It was at this moment that Gracia saw the mother and child, who Raynal had been supposed to kill, safely appearing on TV. He suddenly realized that Raynal was the real undercover agent. Enraged, he flipped the table over, his eyes bloodshot as he stared at the TV screen. He swore that he would personally take care of the traitor, Raynal. That very night, Gracia drove to Paris, secretly meeting with the trafficker Jelen under the cover of darkness, and informed Sot of the new transaction location. Soon after, the two groups met at the location. Meanwhile, Sarah and her team, while discussing their next move, received intelligence from their informant. Jelen and another individual had left the base on motorcycles, and the license plate numbers were provided. Upon hearing this, Charles immediately gathered his forces to take action. Meanwhile, the moment Gracia saw Reynal, he suddenly flashed a dangerous smile and without hesitation exposed his identity. Reynal didn't try to explain anything, simply saying calmly that he was tired. He had predicted that this day of being exposed would come the moment he chose to become an undercover cop. Gracia snorted coldly upon hearing this and ordered Reynal to be taken down to the basement. As for Sot, who still didn't fully understand the situation, he was caught completely off guard and was stabbed in the neck by Gracia. He immediately collapsed into a pool of blood, lifeless. A short while later, the patrolling police finally discovered Jelen's motorcycle. They immediately notified Charles for backup. At this moment, Reynal had been exposed and was being tortured brutally in the basement. Despite the excruciating pain, he refused to reveal any useful information. Gracia, exhausted from the beatings, walked over to the window, preparing to catch his breath. But to his surprise, he saw a fully armed special forces team approaching them. His eyes narrowed, and he quickly shouted for everyone to prepare to resist. However, before he could finish his sentence, in the ensuing chaos, Sarah and her team stormed into the basement and unexpectedly found Reynal, tightly bound. His body was covered in wounds, and his breath was growing weaker. The moment Sarah saw him, a glimmer of light appeared in Reynal's eyes. Then he exhaled his last breath. Sarah's eyes filled with sorrow. This ruthless transnational anti-hot goods operation had claimed the lives of countless teammates, and it was impossible for Sarah to contain the burning rage in her heart. At this time, the battle on the upper floor was still ongoing. Gracia continued to resist desperately. It wasn't until a tear gas grenade blasted through the door that the special forces finally subdued him. However, as he was being escorted past Sarah, Gracia taunted her, recounting in detail how he had tortured Reynal to death. Seeing the unrepentant bastard, Sarah's face turned crimson with fury, and she raised her gun. Just as she was about to pull the trigger, a police officer beside her stopped her, signaling for her not to let her anger cause her to lose control. But just as Gracia thought he had escaped, a bullet from another officer ended his life. With that gunshot, this long-running anti-hot goods operation finally came to an end. And so, the film concludes. This movie blends elements of gunfights, close combat, and crime suspense, depicting the brutality and danger of anti-hot goods work in a realistic and gritty style. This is an excellent police crime film, well worth watching. The value of a film lies in its reputation, and the value of a film review lies in the perception of the viewer. Today's story ends here. Thank you for watching the film. If you enjoyed it, please leave a comment, like the video, and subscribe to the channel.